Good morning, everyone. Today we are starting a new series called The God of Generations, and because that's the name of the series, God of Generations, I'm going to invite three persons from three different generations to come and read the scripture reading for this morning, which is from Exodus 3, verse 1 to 15. So ngam 15 verses. So each one will take 5 verses, okay? So I'm going to invite on stage now Caleb Lewis. Where's Caleb Lewis? Caleb Lewis, Chulina, and Uncle Teo. Uncle Teo. So please give them a warm welcome. They are representing 3 different generations in our church. And before they read the scriptures to us, this one I didn't tell them. I just tell them they're going to read the scriptures. So I'm just going to introduce them a bit so that we know who's reading the scriptures, okay? So my dear friend here, Caleb Lewis, I've seen him growing up from, I think, 8, 9 years old, right? All the years I've literally seen him grow up from a little boy into a fine, handsome young man, right? Yeah. He's now waiting for his placement for first year university, but I told him, don't worry, you got good looks. You sell anything also, can char siu fan sell, durian, all so good looking, very good. So he's Caleb Lewis, right? Then we have Chulina. Chulina is a mother of 4, right? But not just she's a mother of 4, she is a competitive power lifter. In our church, the women are stronger than men. We have Joey all going for powerlifting one, all very power women one, right? So competitive power lifter. Then we have Uncle Teo. Uncle Teo, again, he's the grandfather of Mark and father of Pastor Daniel. He has served in the banking industry for many years, and now he dotes on his grandson. And he is, are you a first-generation Christian? Second generation Christian. He has passed down his faith to Pastor Daniel, who's a 3rd generation Christian, and now it's being passed down to Mark, 4th generation Christian. Wow, so he's a real Dato Teo. So this morning, with that brief introduction, I'll invite them now to read Exodus chapter 3, verse 1 to 5. Can you have it on the screen?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so Caleb will read for us verses 1 to 5. Go on.
Now Moses was keeping the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, the priest of Midian, and he led his flock to the west side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the midst of a bush. He looked, and behold, the bush was burning, yet it was not consumed. And Moses said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses, and he said, Here I am. Then he said, Do not come near, take your sandals off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground.
Okay, all right. Lina.
And he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt, and have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey, to the place of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. And now, behold, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppressed them. Come, I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt.
Verse 11. But Moses said to God, Who am I, that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then shall I tell them, God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am he, has sent me to you. God also said to Moses, say to the Israelites, the Lord, the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. He sent me to you. This is my name forever, the name by which I am to be remembered from generations to generations.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Caleb, Lena, Uncle Teo. Thank you for reading the scriptures for us this morning. Thank you so much. This is my name, and I shall be remembered through all generations. The theme for this year is the God of generations. You can see the bunting here, the God of generations. We have unveiled this theme on the 31st of December 2023 when we had a Thanksgiving lunch. And one of the reasons why we believe this is so important is because we are a multi-generational church. Do you know that CCC, City Community Church, is going to be 30 years this year? 30 years old this year, right? Started in 1994, left one family because everybody left the church and then left one family. And then Pastor Joanne, the one family said, I also bungkus lah, everybody left. We also go somewhere else, How can you have one family church, right? And then Pastor Joanne heard about it. She got a few Form 5 school leavers. I think about 8 of them, is it, Pastor? Then restarted the church, refired the church, right, in 1994. And over the years, we have grown. In the early part of the church, we are all a lot of young people. 70-80% are all MMU students, right? Then after that, one time, Dr. Pang prayed, God, please send more families to the church. And then after that, families came. And today, we are more multi-generationals. You have from toddlers upstairs right up to our oldest church member, Auntie June, 97 years old, who probably is watching online, but every time she can, she would come in her wheelchair and sit right in front there to worship God and to continue to be part of the service. So we are a multi-generational church after 30 years. Now, as the preaching team, we came together and we asked ourselves, can I have the slides, right? What is the burden? What is the burden for 2024? And as we thought about it, as we prayed about it, one of the things that Pastor Joanne have always been mentioning is that God is reintroducing himself to this generation. So now that we are a multi-generational church, we do not want to forget every generation. We don't want to forget the younger generation. We don't want to forget our children, our youth, because those of us who, last time all of you were university students, now maybe you have your own children, right? You have experienced God in your own way, but are our children going to experience God as well? Perhaps not through us, although now they have to rely in a way on our faith, but how do our children experience God themselves? And how will God reintroduce himself to our children? But not just our children, but at every stage of life. Will God reintroduce himself to us as adults, whether you're a young adult, middle adult, older adult? Will God reintroduce himself to us in a fresh way? Because some of us have been Christians for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And sometimes our faith may get a bit stale. And will God rekindle that faith and reintroduce himself to us in this generation? On a Wednesday night, I was at the gym, and my gym trainer is a Nigerian guy, and I said, hey, coach, can we finish early? Because I want to watch the South Korea and Malaysia match. He said, you need to watch, you are going to lose, you'll lose 4-0. He predicted for me, he thinks he's a prophet. So we had a long gym session, then we finished about 8:30, right? And then I had to do something. And then on the way back to my home, my friend texts me, he says, Malaysia leading 2-1. I said, wow, I drove faster, I want to go back and start watching the game. And when I reached home, Malaysia was still leading 2-1. Okay, so Sophia Joy, she was watching some YouTube clips, and I say, turn on the Astro now. I said, why? Because Malaysia playing with South Korea. I said, okay. Then look for the remote. She get a kanchon. And I said, okay, what's happening? I say, South Korea is like a world superpower. We are leading 2-1. Say, really? Yes. Then, wow, he said, we are on the precipice of a big victory now. I say, yes. Then I say, maybe got holiday tomorrow if we win, Wow, she got more excited. Say, wow, really? Oh, wow. And then I start watching, right? Start watching the game, 2-1. And when we turn it on, it was still 2-1. And then at the 83rd minute, free kick, bam, masuk, 2-2. I said, reality sets in, right? Then after that, extra time. Wow, 15 minutes extra time, right? Then on the 4th minute of extra time, pop, kena penalty. Then Sophia Joy, why not fair lah? What is it? A penalty is fair, because you brought him down. So 4th minute, they scored a penalty, right? 3-2. Wow, reality really set in and sang in, right? So now we are trailing by 2-3. So we were still watching, and I was sitting on the stool next to her. Because she was sitting on the sofa, I was sitting on the stool next to her, and we watch. 10 minutes, 11 minutes, 12 minutes of extra time, 13 minutes, 14 minutes, 15 minutes of extra time. Morales got the ball just in the penalty box and slipped home the 3rd goal for Malaysia. And as the goal went in, I was literally jumping off from my stool, jumping out, yeah. And Sophia Joy, my daughter, she was also rejoicing, yeah. Although it was just a draw, but it meant so much to us as Malaysians, right? Those of us who like football. Those of you who don't like football, you are thinking, what are you talking about? But those of you who love football, you're like, wow. As a matter of fact, a lot of ladies don't really naturally like football, but the few ladies who like football, sometimes when you ask them, why do you like football? Because it's a man's game primarily, right? And they'll say, always because when I was small, I watched with my father, or I watched with my brother, right? And because of that, I caught the love for the game. Sometimes when I watch football games with my daughter, I will tell her what's a free kick, what's a penalty kick, what's a goal kick, what's a red card, what's a yellow card. She was learning all these rules of the game from me. But more than that, when she saw me being so passionate about the game, it's not something that she's taught, it's something that is caught. And when we think about passing down our faith to our next generation, our faith is something a lot of time that is caught. It is not just taught. And I was thinking about that football moment that I shared with my daughter yesterday while preparing for this message. A word just came to me so clearly in my mind, in my spirit. It says, you will pass your passion to your children. Wow. You will pass your passion to your children. And then the next sentence came, be careful what you're passionate about. Whoa, that really spoke to me. You will pass your passion to your children, like it or not. It's your passion. You will pass it down. You like badminton, your children will most likely like badminton. You like reading, your children most likely will like reading. You like politics, your children will like politics, right, Kirk? Your father was a Secretary General of DAP. Pass it down. You will pass down your passion, so be careful what you're passionate about, because you want to pass down good passions, not bad passions. And so as we talk about God reintroducing himself to the generation, especially to the next generation, that the parents are the one who are tasked. When I read scriptures, I find that parents are the one who are tasked to pass it down primarily. Because if you look at Deuteronomy, it says that every time when you're walking, when you're sitting, when you're eating, talk to your children about the faith. Or when the children ask you, why is it that we have to do all these statutes? Tell them you were once, slaves in Egypt. You were liberated, and God gave us these statutes. So parents are the main person's task to teach our children about the faith. So it's not the Sunday school teacher, it's not Pastor Daniel, although they are very, very good help, but primarily parents are tasked to pass our faith down, to pass our passion down. This morning, the text is from Exodus 3. Can we have the slides again? And as we go through the text, I'll just give you some commentary, and then we will launch, in a way, our theme for this year. The context for the text is that Moses is an extremely vivid, wonderful, compelling story in Exodus. At that time, the Israelites were under Egyptian rule. They were growing in numbers. Pharaoh was threatened by the growing numbers of these pendatang. So Pharaoh says that all the male children shall be killed. So Moses was born. His mother hid him for 3 months, thinking that nobody will know. But after a while, cannot hide anymore because maybe cry too loud. So she put him in the river. So as Moses was in a basket flowing down the river, his sister, thank God for sisters, his big sister was looking at what would happen to that basket. And then Pharaoh's daughter was bathing in the river. She took pity on this baby, although it's a Hebrew baby. But she says, well, I took pity on this baby. And then the sister quickly come, hey, you know what? You need someone to take care of the baby? I know someone, a Hebrew woman who can take care. So, okay, bring her. Brought her mother, took care of Moses, right? Think about that. You thought you were going to lose your baby. Now you can take care of your baby and be paid for taking care of your baby. That's how great God is. And so she took care of Moses. Moses grew up in the palace. Moses for 40 years. So Moses' life, Moses, by the way, is the author of Genesis, because this year we're going to look at the book of Genesis. So for this Sunday, we're going to study the author, the one who wrote Genesis, Moses, okay? So Moses' life can be separated into 3 parts, 40. First 40 years, grew up in the palace, learned the code, all those, learned from the best teachers in Egypt, learned the Egyptian code of law, had best education in Egypt. And that is why later he could write the first 5 books of the Old Testament, because he has been trained, highly educated in the palace of Egypt. But then, one day, when he saw a Hebrew and an Egyptian fighting, he after a while, he knew that he's a Hebrew, he's a Jew, right? And he felt that in his blood, there is this passion to liberate his own people. So he killed the Egyptian, right? He rescued the Jew, and he thought the Jew would be very thankful. But the next day, when he saw another 2 Jews fighting, then he tried to mediate. Then they say, who do you think you are? Are you going to kill us just like you killed the Egyptian? So news broke out that he murdered someone. Pharaoh was very angry. So one day he was like sitting in line to ascend to the throne in Egypt. The next day, he's a fugitive. He had to run away, flee for his life, go into the desert. And for the next 40 years, Moses was in the desert. His dreams were crushed. His hopes were crushed. This thing about liberating Israel was a distant dream. Now he's just taking care of sheep. And in verse 1, we find that the sheep is not even his own sheep. It is his father's-in-law sheep. Well, thank God your father-in-law can give him a job. So he had a job as a shepherd. He was taking care of the sheep. And then he was at the west side of wilderness. He came to Horeb, the mountain of God. That's the context for the story. And then, while he was in the wilderness, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of the bush. He looked, behold, the bush was burning. Wow, but it was not consumed. An angel was there. The bush was burning. It was not consumed. R.C. Sproul, a famous theologian, says the reason is because the fire was independent of the bush. So the fire being a theophany, being a manifestation of the person of God, usually when you burn, you need to have a substance for you to burn. But here, the fire was independent of the substance. So the fire was burning independently, and that is why the bush seems to be burning, but it was not consumed. The fire within was burning independently of the bush. And Moses said, when you're in the wilderness for 40 years, you start to talk to yourself, and there's no one. So Moses said, there's no one else, you said, I will turn aside to see this great sight, why the bush is not burned, right? Because no one else to talk to, the sheep, they might talk to himself. When the Lord saw that he turned aside to see, God called him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. God knew his name. Moses, Moses. And then he says, here I am. Can you imagine for 40 years, you're in the wilderness, And you thought, everybody has forgotten you. And you live in obscurity for 40 years. And one day you have a flaming fire. God knows your name. Moses, Moses. He says, then God says, do not come near. Take your sandals off for the feet, off your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. So Moses was invited to go into the presence of God. Moses was invited to now be obedient to God. You know, if you want to hear the voice of God, one of the prerequisites, we have to be obedient to God. When God says something, we have to be obedient. You know, it doesn't make sense if we are not obedient to what God said and then we want further revelation. So here God, the first thing God says is, don't come near, take your sandals off. The place on which you are standing is holy ground. When God revealed himself to Moses from the flaming bush. When I read a story like this, I sometimes ask myself, you know, God, where is my burning bush? You know, I don't have a burning bush, you know. I mean, Moses had a personal encounter, but today, do we have a burning bush? Some of us are envious of Moses. You know, Moses got a burning bush. How come I don't have a burning bush? You know, don't be so envious of Moses because he had to spend 40 years in the wilderness before he had a burning bush. But what it means is that Moses had to have some solitude. He had to have some silence. He had to be taken away from all the other things that distract him in order to have the full attention of God. And Moses was at that point in his life where he had full attention. He gave full attention to God. And God revealed himself in the burning bush. Today, we may not have a lot of burning bushes like that, you know. But I was talking to a friend yesterday, and he said, you know, but we can do something simple. Although we are very busy, although we have so many things to do, whether you're a professional, you're a full-time mom, you know, you have so many things to do. How are you going to hear God? And it says actually three things. You know, when you pray, you can just say three things to God. Either please, thank you, or sorry. So throughout the day, just say either please, thank you, or sorry. Don't have to make your prayers very complicated. So if this morning you wake up, you had a very good night's sleep, says thank you, God, for a good night's rest. Your wife brought you nasi lemak. Thank you, God. My wife is so good, brought me nasi lemak. Right? If you are going to have an important assignment, important meeting, right? Important work, God, please help me. And then sometimes when we don't think about God, when we do something wrong, it says, God, I am sorry. So throughout the day, we can have little burning bush experiences. Very simple. Either please, thank you, or sorry. So what happened as Moses had this encounter? God says, I'm the God of your father, the God of Abraham, God of Isaac, God of Jacob. Moses hid his face because he knew when he came face to face with God, he's a sinful man. Right? He hid his face, he was afraid to look at God. And then God says, I have seen the affliction of my people. You know, the first time I really listened to a message on Exodus 3 was when I was in university. When I was at a stage of my life when I was seeking about God. Because in university, although I grew up in a Sunday school, but when I went to law school, I asked myself, is God really real? When I prayed, is there someone who hears me? Am I a Christian because my parents brought me to Sunday school? If they had brought me somewhere else, maybe I'm something else, right? So I was seeking again for God to reintroduce himself to me. And one of the sermons that I remember going to the Christian fellowship in university was this sermon from Exodus 3. And he says, God says, I've surely seen the affliction of my people. I've heard their cry. I know their suffering. That God is a personal God. That as we seek after God, God is not just an idea. He's not just an abstraction. He's not just a concept. God is a person. And God is a person who sees. God is a person who hears. And God is a person who knows. God reveals himself as a person. It says, I've come down to deliver them, to bring them out of the land. And behold, the cry of the Israelites have come to me. And then God says, I have heard, I have seen, I have heard their cry, I've seen their suffering, I know, I'm going to deliver. Then in verse 10, it says, come, I send you to Pharaoh. And that's always how God works, you know, because as God works in our life, in the life of the country, in the life of the nation, God doesn't work in vacuum. God always works through people. And so God is going to rescue the Israelites out, but he says, I'm going to send you to Pharaoh and to bring my people, the children of Israel out of Egypt. Then Moses said, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? I mean, this is not an easy task, because you're supposed to emancipate the whole country, the whole nation. There were about 2 million Jews at that time living under Egyptian rule. You're supposed to bring them out, right? This is no easy task. And you have Pharaoh, who's going to kill you and snuff you out. He says, who am I? Now, when he was 40 years old, he was very confident. But after his postgraduate in the wilderness for 40 years, God has humbled him. Because God wanted Moses to know, yes, I'm going to use you, but it's primarily going to be me, not you, doing the work. So Moses had to be humbled through a wilderness experience for 40 years. If you're in a wilderness experience, I know it's going to be tough. I know it's going to not be easy, but tell yourself, when you're in a wilderness experience, it's always because God is preparing you for something greater. And God used that 40 years of wilderness experience to prepare Moses for the greatest season of his career, so to speak. So God says that who am I that I should go? So God says, he said, but I will be with you. You see, Moses, you're not going to do this alone. When you were at 40 years old, you thought you are going to be the emancipator of Israel. And you tried to do it yourself. But now, 40 years later, you are going to do the same thing, but this time you will know that I will be with you. That I'm the one who is going to do the work. I'm the one who have sent you. I'm the one who is going to bring the people out, but you will be my servant to accomplish that work. Then Moses said to God, wow, if I come to the people of Israel, say to them, the God of your fathers have sent me, and they ask me, what is his name? Actually, very relevant question, because at that time they have many gods with many names. So they say, wow, your God sent you. Okay, what is your God's name, right? So Moses wants to know, now you gave me this authority, but now there's a PR thing, a public relationship. I have to communicate to them. What is your name? What am I going to say to them? What shall I say to them? Every time you ask God a question, when you get the answer, sometimes it's a bit perplexing. You ask a simple question, but the answer may not be so simple or may not seem so simple. Right? Because God, he's God, right? He's not man. So you must expect that there's some mystery about the answer. So here is an actual story of a man speaking with God that's recorded for us in scriptures, right? And so Moses asked God, what is your name? And God says, I am who I am. Oh, I am who I am. And he said, say this to the people of Israel, I am has sent me to you. At first, it may not seem like answering the question, but we're going to see what it means. And God also said to Moses, say to the people of Israel, the Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name, and I'll be remembered through all generations. So what does it mean when God says to Moses, I am who I am? And this is one of the most startling revelations about who God is. Because when we talk about a God of generations, our focus is not on the generations, our focus is on the God of generations. And as we focus on the God of generations, God will draw the generations to himself. So who is this God of the generations? Moses got the answer, I am who I am. That when God says, I am who I am, God is saying, I am the absolute reality. You ask me who I am, let me tell you who I am. I am the absolute reality. There's nothing I can compare myself to. And so I am who I am. I define reality. Sometimes when I deal with legal cases in my day-to-day work, and most of the times when cases come to lawyers, it's always in a bad situation. And sometimes I have to tell either the client or the opposing counsel, it is what it is. You have to know what the reality is. The reality is bad. The reality is not ideal. It is what it is. There's this phrase that people like to use. It is what it is. You don't like it, You are not happy with it, but it is what it is. That's the reality. So when God says, I am who I am, God is saying that I'm the absolute reality. There's nothing I can compare myself to. I have no beginning, I have no end, because that's why I am who I am, not I was. That I'm outside time. That's why, even though I talk about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, they were in the past, but I am who I am, because I'm a being that is outside of time. And because I'm the absolute reality, everything else is secondary, I'm primary. And because I am absolute reality, I am worthy to be worshipped, I'm worthy to be loved, I'm worthy to be adored. And because I am who I am, because I have no beginning and no end, that's why I'm a God who will be remembered through all generations. Because God's shelf life is not just for one generation. Because God is the God of eternity, from the past to the present to the future. And that is why he says, I am who I am. But if you think that seems so abstract, that God is I am who I am, God came down one step further and says, but I'm the God of Abraham. I'm the God of Isaac. I'm the God of Jacob. That although I'm the one who flung the stars into the sky, yesterday night, my daughter and I, we were just looking up the clear sky, and we said, wow, look at the stars. And although I'm the one who flung stars into the sky, I'm a God who is personal. Although I am distinct, but I am not distant. I'm very close. I'm a God of real people with real names. You remember Abraham? You remember Isaac? You remember Jacob? I'm their God. And I'm the God of generations. I'm a personal God. As I wrap this up, I just want to close with 3 learning lessons from this passage that we read about this morning. The first is this: who is this God of generations? The first is this, that God is personal. God is personal. God is a personal God. A lot of people will have objections or will think that there are difficulties about the Christian faith. And these are very real, legitimate questions. For example, people will say about the atonement. We had the communion just now. Why is it that one person can die for the sins of the whole world? Okay? Why is it that way? Why one person pay for the sin of the whole world? Doesn't make sense. Or there may be questions about the resurrection. How is it that Jesus can die and then rise again? Because every time I see someone die, the person never rise again. Why is it that Jesus is so special? Or questions about the healing, about the miracles of Jesus. How is it that can be something so supernatural? And I've not seen it today, how come it happened last time? So there may be legitimate questions raised about the Christian faith, but J.I. Packer, a theologian, says that those are not the real difficulties about the faith. The most difficult thing to accept about the Christian faith is the incarnation. That God, who is eternal, came to be a man, came to be a baby in a manger. He says that is the most difficult thing to accept. But if we can accept that incarnation, everything else will dissolve by itself. Because if the eternal God can become man, then when he died for the sin of the world, he can die for the sin of the world. If God became man, then God can heal. If God became man, God can suspend the laws, the natural laws, and bring healing and bring restoration and raise people from the dead. If God became man, God also can be raised from the dead. And so the incarnation is the one that is most difficult to accept. And that's why in John's Gospel, in chapter 1, verse 1, as John proclaims who Jesus is, he proclaims in no uncertain term that Jesus was God. He says, in the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. That Jesus is distinct from the Father, but Jesus is also God himself. He was with God, he was God. He's eternal, he's omniscient, he's omnipresent, he's omnipotent. He was in the beginning with God, right? And then verse 3, all things were made through him, and without him was nothing made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of man. If we can roll back the history of the universe right to where it first started. What happened? Who created the universe? And John's answer is this, that in the beginning was the Word was with God. Everything was created by Him. And it says, in Him was life. If you roll it back right to the beginning of the universe, there was God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. There was life. And the life was the light of man. The life was the light of man. And it says here in verse 14, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. So this God who created everything became flesh and dwelt among us. Eugene Peterson says that God moved into our neighborhood. That is the story of the Bible, the incarnation of Jesus. I was reminded that Christmas has been more than a month away. And when I read this in this book called Knowing God, it says that as Christians, we always talk about the Christmas spirit, especially during Christmas season, right? When we talk about the incarnation of Christ. But it says a lot of times when we talk about the Christmas spirit as Christians, we think of it just as a sentimental jollity. And it says this is a shame and disgrace. Wow. It says a lot of us as Christians, we don't have the Christmas spirit. Because we only think about, our only ambition is to build our own middle-class home, our own middle-class friends, bring up our children in a nice middle-class way, and we forget everyone else in the community. It says if we want to have the Christmas spirit, and we should have the Christmas spirit throughout the year, it says if God in His mercy revive us, we must have the Spirit of Christ, which says that the grace of our Lord Jesus, though He was rich, yet for our sakes became poor, that you through His poverty might become rich. If we truly have the Christmas spirit, if we truly believe the incarnation, as a church we must go out to the city and minister to the city. That's why our third core value is called to the city. Because the Christmas spirit is not just sentimentality. If God came into our neighborhood, we too should go into the city and be part of the city. Earlier this week, I brought 2 Singaporeans to my wife's learning center. My wife teaches in a learning center for mostly refugee children. They are all mostly Rohingya refugees. Many of us may not know, but there are about 2,000 plus Rohingyas in Malacca, and there's education that is being provided for them. I brought these 2 Singaporean friends, potential donors. You get 1 Singaporean donor, get like 3.5 Malaysian donor. So good to bring Singaporean donors, potential donor. So when I brought them, they were so impressed because as they were walking up the stairs, all the Rohingya children would say, "Uncle, good morning, Auntie, good morning." Then when we were going to the classroom, even before we step into the classroom, someone would stand up and say, "Good morning, Uncle and Auntie, good morning, Uncle and Auntie." Right? He said, "Wow, this is so good because Singapore, all the children will chap you on, when you walk past them. This one's so good, they are so well-mannered." Then I brought them to the Orang Asli Hostel, right? Orang Asli Hostel, I said, this pastor, 100 over students to this Orang Asli Hostel, And I told them, I say, my partner, Brother Chi, every first day of Chinese New Year will bring ANW with the bear and give them root beer, give them corny dog, give them sandwiches. And some of them, when they get this root beer, when they get this corny dog, they don't even want to eat it because it's so precious to them. Some of them will keep it to savor it. Some of them will say, "Oh, I will just take half, or I will keep this root beer because I want to give to my sister." That's how precious it is. When we get into the neighborhood and share, a lot of times you think you're going to be the one blessing people, but you're the one who is blessed. And I have my good friend Kian Meng, Raj, Kirk with us this morning. After this, we're going to talk about some public policy for Malacca. Because as we think about the city, it's not just about our own profession, our own business. How do we bring people together so that the city can flourish? Like what Jeremiah says, seek the welfare of the city. So first, God is personal. God is the one who sees, who hears, who cares. And as Christians, as we go out into the world, we see, we hear, and we care about the world that is around us. So first, God is personal. Second, God reveals himself to generations. God says, I'm the God of Abraham, I'm the God of Isaac, I'm the God of Jacob. I'm a God who is personal. We're going to study Genesis together. And Genesis is divided from chapters 1 to 11. It's about the creation of the universe, creation of the world, about Adam and Eve, about the fall, and then about the nations, and then about the flood, and then about Noah, and about Tower of Babel. So that is the macro picture, first 11 chapters. Then chapters 12 to 50, for about 75% of the proportion of the book, is the lens zoom in into only one family. The family of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. So that proportion in Genesis itself is a message. Because when Genesis is written from God's point of view. And from God's point of view, although the cosmos and the creation and the universe and the nations are very important, but God's redemptive plan are always through people, through real people with real names. And because the redemptive plan is through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, that 70% of the book is devoted into just the narrative of this one family. And when we talk about Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, they are not saints, they are not perfect people that you're going to be able to see. Because the Bible is very clear about all these people whom God uses. They are all failed people. They are all people who are sometimes very, very flawed. Abraham lied about his wife. Isaac, nothing much about him, nothing spectacular. Jacob is someone you do not want to be on the worship team, the preaching team. Jacob is someone you don't want to do business with because he's a schemer, right? He scam even his own brother. That is Jacob, right? But all of these three, although they are very flawed, but they have one thing that is in common, that they also had faith. That in their fallenness, their faith is practiced in different ways. Abraham practiced faith by, we saw last week about how he left Ur of the Chaldeans, how he one day sacrificed Isaac on the altar. Isaac exhibited faith by submitting himself to the sacrifice. Jacob, although in the early part of his life ran away from God, but one day he wrestled with God in the middle of the night, and then he surrendered to God and said, okay, I'm coming back. So it's a generational faith that is played out in different ways. And so God is a God who reveals himself to generations. I'll invite the worship team to come up as we close with this last lesson. I have the slides. God is personal. God reveals himself to generations. And sometimes when we come to say, hey, I want to know who God is, it can be very stressful. Because we're all mortal, limited human beings. How are we going to know who God is? We can't even know our mathematics properly. We can't even know our economy properly. We can't even do our own things properly. We have so much problems, so much issues. How are we going to know who God is? It seems to be such a lofty pursuit. But the most important thing as we come to the God of generations is not even to know who God is. And I want to tell you the most important thing about coming to know the God of generations is that God knows us. God knows your name. Before we want to know God, God already knows us. And God is, in Exodus 33 verse 17, God said to Moses, you have found favor in my sight, for I know you by name. Wow. Is there in the wilderness 40 years. He was a murderer. He killed someone's life. He took someone's life. He has his dreams dashed, his hopes crushed. Living in the wilderness 40 years. And one day God appeared to him and called Moses, Moses. God knows his name. Whatever situation you are in today, as we talk about the God of generation, as God reintroduces himself to you and to me, God firstly wants to tell you, I know your name. Some of you may be a young adult and you are just starting out in life and you're trying to find your footing and you're trying to find a name for yourself. But I want to tell you this morning, God already knows your name. Some of you may be mothers, you are taking care of small babies. Every time babies cry, it's such a beautiful sound. It's because it shows there's life. And you may be clothing your baby, bathing your baby, taking care of your cranky baby every day. And you think, wow, that's so stressful. But I want to tell you that God knows your name. God knows your name. And some of you may be advanced in years. And you may not be holding any official position, not having any job titles. Billy Graham was said that, he was preaching the whole wide world, but in his later years, he can't preach, he can't write, but he's on his wheelchair, he has Parkinson's disease, but he still was faithful. And he still was witnessing, he was still a witness of the faithfulness of God. Sometimes you don't have to do anything because God loves us not based on our performance, but based on who we are. God knows your name. Shall we all stand this morning to a God who knows our name? This song that we're going to sing together is written by Don Moe, and one day he went to a nursing home and he saw an old man all crunched up. And on his bed, every person on the bed, there will be your name. And this person's bed, on top of the bed, it says, Mr. No Name. No name. Because he was taken from the street and nobody knows this man's name. And so this songwriter, as he held his hands, he says, sir, people may not know your name, but God knows your name. God knows your name. Let's sing this song together.